I defer to you, Ronald. You're the
You cold-blooded T.
Hey man,
Good evening, everybody. My name's Ronald White. I'm an alcoholic.
amen.
Uh, I have a sobriety date of July the 14th of 1986. Home group is Never Too Early Big Book Workshop. My sponsor's name is Jerome Scott. And I sponsor men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous. I know this isn't an AA meeting, so I can kind of say that without feeling violative. Uh, I and so I suppose the question, Raquel, was when did it become just a part of what I do or who I am or whatever. It's so hard it's a difficult thing to really point out. It's almost like when they say we cross the invisible line, when it ceased to be a necessity, luxury, and it became a necessity, and you can't see the line when you cross it. And in looking back on when did this seeking become a part of what I do, I suppose I was fortunate enough to be in a place where I had some guys, my brother Ralph, we had a good friend named Leon Mason. And when we were, and within our first year, we began, swallowing meetings like, almost as if we were using, and we loved, meeting hopping. And I didn't know that maybe I did know, but I'm not sure if I knew that I was seeking right then. I knew I wanted to stay sober. And I knew that the thing that I had found when I was in the recovery home, the Harbor Light Center, with in-house meetings that were brought there by a panel of Alcoholics Anonymous, I wanted what the men and women who brought that meeting into recovery home, what they had, which was they were different than their stories. And I wanted that. I had had a life before. I'd had some success in life before. But I had lost it all. And my concept of God was that God was punishing me. I've always believed there was a God. I've never not believed there was a God. But my conception of that power, Raquel, was one I was quite frightened of. In fact, I believed that it indeed was like Santa Claus, and that it was like making a list and checking it twice. And I had been doing a lot of naughty things for a long time, and I thought that it had been taken from me. So when I got to the fellowship, there was no doubt in my mind that there was a God, but relationship with that God was what I did not have. And I'll talk some more about maybe where that division came from, and when it started from when I was young. But I'd like to hear Terry's perception on this, his perspective on this, because I know he'll say some things that trigger some stuff in me. So, Terry, why don't you go ahead and see if you can tackle that question?
All right. So God has been in a relentless pursuit for me my whole life. I was born in, as Chuck C talks about, conscious unity with the God that made me. And to get formalities out, my name's Terry Murphy. My sobriety date's May 23rd, 1991. I got a home group. I got a sponsor. I'm actively involved in my recovery. And I do all of those things because I like the effect produced by sobriety. And God was pursuing me my whole life. I was just on the run. And where I really recognized that I had to engage in this thing, it became really clear to me. I had had moments in my life where, I'm born in this conscious unity. And then someplace around 11 or 12 years old, there was a split. And at that period, it's like my mom got sick with cancer. Drugs were exploding. I'm number 9 out of 10 kids. So everybody's drinking, everybody's drugging, everybody's killing their feelings. And so I started doing all that stuff. And I kept feeling this like tremendous separation, right? And I knew that God was much like what you were talking about. I had this fear because I was betrayed. I was betrayed when I was in the 8th grade. It could have been 7th. I was busted for doing a narcotic called Seconal Reds, right? I had taken 4 Reds at Catholic school, and I'm stumbling, I'm falling out, and I'm so lit up, and it was terrible. And the nuns called me in. Not that day. I was overdosed, and I was projectile vomiting. I thought I was going to die. The nuns called me in a couple of days later, and they said, we understand that you've been doing drugs. Some of the other boys told on you. And we know your mother's dying of cancer, and if you tell the truth will set you free. So don't you ever, you tell the truth, and we're not going to tell that poor woman. We don't want to add to her suffering. So I'm already a little street hood, right? And you know this code of the street, never give up the truth, keep your mouth shut, all those bullshit lies, right? So I gave it up, man. I said, yes, sisters, I did, right? And the very next day I walked off the school bus, and my mom said, come here, I need to talk to you. And she took me back in the laundry room. We're here with cancer. She's ironing all the clothes because she was proud and Irish, right? She wanted the kids to have shine shoes for church. And she said, the sisters came by today and they told me my son is a filthy doper. She said, the shame you have brought on this family. If I tell your father, he'll beat you to death. And even though you need that and deserve it, I need him to feed the rest of these kids. And then she said, the shame you brought on your sister Kathy and your brother John and Jim and Rita and Maura and Colleen and Kevin and Michael and Brian, whacking me with that shame. And then my mother looked at me. She said, listen, you're going to carry this secret to your grave, a grave you put me in early. Now get out of here. You make me sick. That was my drug and alcohol treatment at 12. I walked out of that room feeling a million miles away from God, knowing you can't trust anything of religiosity, right? So I was in that place, and I stayed pretty distant all those years. And then my life kept colliding with me, right? At 18, I overdosed, and I had an out-of-body experience, and I saw myself laying on the floor. And it looked like I'd been chewing bubble gum, like that bazooka bubble, from my nose all the way to my waist. And I looked and I see myself laying there, and the rig is still in my arm, dried.
Chicago compares hotel prices from hundreds of sites, so you can save up to 40%.
It disintegrated. And when I touched this bubble, it disintegrated. And I realized what that was blood and phlegm. And I've been unconscious for like 12 hours. And as I saw myself from above, I started begging God, God, please, I can't die. I've never even lived. Please, God, I'll never use again. Please, God, help me. I don't want to die. And I literally felt myself come back into my body. And it was like, damn, that was powerful. God, thank you. Until the dope called again. And I had no effective defense. So God was in pursuit of me no matter what I had done. And then the last time that I knew I had to engage, I was 12-stepped into a detox. And I'm in this detox facility for 5 days. And I'm 140 pounds. I'm 220 now, right? I'm sucked up. I'm strung out. I'm in such bad shape. And they said, AA meeting next door. And I got up and followed them all out. But everybody went to the AA meeting. I went to the field and dug out my crack pipe. And I took that crack pipe and I took it back and I put it in the waistband of my clothes and I hit that pipe. One more time, stand in the bathroom. 5 days sober. And I hit that pipe and I blew out this huge cloud of smoke and I felt nothing. And I looked in the reflection in the mirror and there was drool on my chin and there was something on my lip, and I looked, and it was a burnt bug, and I checked in the bowl. It was the burnt remnants. The bugs had found a crack pipe, and we're having a little party with it, and I put that fire to it, and there I was 5 days after hitting bottom, and here I had now had a secret on top of it. And I dropped that pipe in that trash can, and I climbed on top of a plastic covered mattress, and I said, if there's another way to live, God, you better show it to me. God, help me. And at that moment, God answered that prayer. And then I realized if God had been answering all those prayers my whole life, the ones in the foxholes, the one who saved me from overdoses, the ones that saved me from the penitentiary, that what would happen if I pursued that God, not out of fear, but out of love? And that's when it changed for me. How about you?
I'd always been raised in church. I have 5 brothers. I'm the third oldest of 5. And my mother, single mom, raising us by herself because she put my dad out because he was a drinker and he couldn't bring home a paycheck. And so she separated from him when I was very young. And my mother would have no alcohol, no substances in our household at all. We were in South Central Los Angeles, very poor. Mama, very proud woman. She didn't want to be on welfare. We had to get food stamps for a while and some other things, but Mama was very proud. Mama didn't like being on welfare, so she starts working as a domestic, cooking and cleaning for other people's families to keep her sons fed. And she was active in our lives, even while doing all that work. She was active in the PTA, even became president of the PTA at our school. And my mother really loved education. My mother went to night school to get her high school diploma because she didn't have a high school diploma, Terry, at the time. And she went to adult school to get her high school diploma, and then she went to night school to get a college degree to start working on that. She got, this should have been a sign for me. She got her AA degree, right? At first when she went to college, and then after she finished 2 years, and then she went on to get another degree. But one thing that she really stressed, in addition to education, was religion. She believed in God. She's the most God-fearing woman that I know. Had us in church every Sunday, 6 boys. I can't even imagine getting 1 or 2 dressed, and she got 6 of us dressed every Sunday morning, complaining that I got a stomach ache and I can't go. Mama wasn't having it. You get dressed, right? She got us all up. We had to be dressed. And we never had a family car, yet we were in church every Sunday somehow through our grandparents, my dad's parents, or some other people from church. And I remember my first experience going to church. We went to this church called Weller Street Baptist Church. It's located in the downtown area of Los Angeles. And it was run by, my grandfather was one of the founding members. My grandfather came from down south. And these other folks who had migrated to Los Angeles from down south started this church. And the preacher, Terry, by this time, I'm a reader. And so I think that I got some book smarts. And so I'm a little bit, I can say I have a good vocabulary. And the preacher's up there and he's pounding on the pulpit and he's like, "Arrah," and all that. And I'm thinking, listen to this clown. He can't even talk right. I'm critiquing the pastor now. He's supposed to be a representative of God and he can't even talk. And as he's pounding on the pulpit, what I hear, this is what I hear, Terry, is fear God. That God will punish you if you do anything wrong, that you would, and my concept right then, I never had any concept of a loving God that initially, and I know this is as a child, maybe my ears just focused on the fear part, not any love part. And so I'm growing up as a kid, kind of like being very fearful of God. But I thought that it was all about respect. And we changed churches. And as I'm going to this other church, Tabernacle of Faith Missionary Baptist Church, and my mother, they used to call us the little white boys. Me, Ralph, and Reggie were And believe me, in South Central, being called a little white boy was not very, it's not, anyway, that's an aside. So they call us the little white boys, and we were learning scriptures. I knew how to pronounce every book in the Bible, in order, and frontwards and in reverse. I don't know what utility that had, being able to name the books of the Bible in reverse, but we were into it. I was really into religion. And there was one Sunday, and I didn't tell Ralph and them this. I didn't tell my mother this. I never told anybody this, because I really know when there's a place in our book where it says, I need to concede to my innermost self. And at first I was like, well, what did it mean? Your innermost? I've always had an innermost self. I've always had a piece of me that I've hidden away. And we were in church one Sunday, and I'm sitting on the pew. I'm sitting on one of the pews, and there's a woman sitting there with her daughter. The daughter's about the same age as me. I might be 9, 10 years old. I forget, very young. And I'm sitting, and the preacher is preaching, and the little girl is next to me. She's wearing a beautiful little petticoat dress or whatever. You know how the little girls dress, with the little shoes with the socks with the frills on them and all that stuff. And she said, and she's wearing stockings, because that's what all little girls wore back then. They all wore stockings when they went to church. And as I'm sitting there, I hear the little girl's legs rub together, and I hear the sound of that silk. And when I hear that sound, my little thing just went bing. Don't laugh at me, Terry. It was only little because I was young. Okay, so and when that happened, my head told me, what's wrong with you? You're in the house of the Lord, and you're having these thoughts and these feelings. And right then, I started hiding from God.
Damn, that's a hell of a memory, man. That's a hell of a memory, man. I got some of that kind of shame that came out on an inventory once for me too, man. But I'll tell you what, that's a powerful, powerful story, right? So when I talked about that conscious unity, right, that's what we're talking about, where there was a break. Sounds like it happened for you right there. It happened for me too, man. All of a sudden, my dishonesty, and then in come wrong behaviors, and then in comes porn, and in comes robberies and thieving and drugging and drinking. And then the next thing you know, man, I am as far away from the person I knew I was called to be as the East is from the West. And there I am, stuck there. And everything in between what God calls me to be and what I am is conflict, right? There's so much space for conflict. You said something that was really interesting in there about that, about this fire and this fear of God. And I used to really believe that that was the case, that I was raised with this idea that God was going to do that. And then I started to question my own thinking. So I like this format, right? Question your own thinking about God. And what I realized is that really wasn't what I was taught. I was taught that Jesus loved the little children, all of them, right? And we'd sing those little songs. And I was taught about a God that, bring the children unto me and all that beautiful stuff. But my disease attached itself to the fearful God, because as long as I can put God down, I don't ever have to do any work to develop a relationship. So when a man comes to me, oftentimes he'll say, man, I got a real problem with God. And I think, yeah, I bet God's got a problem with your ass too, right? So it's interesting how all of this changes, right? So I had an experience in treatment, and here was the experience. I was sitting there and I was filled with fear. I'm not a Bible reader. I'm Catholic, right? So we got the priest to read the Bibles for us. My sponsor today is a Catholic priest, right? I love God. I love the church. Most of the objections I had were created by my diseased mind, not by anything that was really done to me. But so I'm in this place and I'm in treatment. I'm a newcomer and I'm looking at my life and here I am, broken, unemployed. I was fired while I was in treatment. My marriage is on the rocks. I've already had bankruptcies and infidelity. My marriage is hanging by a thread. There's no money to buy groceries to feed the kids. They're going to repossess the car. They're going to take back the house after rebuilding them after bang. I mean, I'm in a bad place. And I was sitting there, man, and I was so, and what I'm talking about right now is a real visit from God. And I'd be interested to hear your own experience when I'm done telling this story. So I'm sitting there and I was so discouraged. I thought, how am I ever going to make this right? I knew a good life was possible. I'd seen people who lived right and done right, like my parents. But how am I going to go from this place of total brokenness to a better life? Knowing that under the best of circumstances, I'm not a very good manager anyway, let alone being in a treatment center, destroyed physically, financially, relationally. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, oh man, it was as though here I was, hopeless, in despair. And there was like a mountain of shit between me and a good life I could see in the distance. How do I ever get there? And what I heard was this, man. What I heard and what I saw is the perfect format to show you this. What I heard was a voice, and what I saw were two hands. And what I heard was this. Terry, I'm thinking, how am I ever going to make this right? How do I get Donna back? How do I get her to, how do I make this right? And my mind's racing. And I heard, Terry, you don't have to worry about any of that. All you've got to do is one thing. And he held that finger up. And then he started poking it in the palm of his hand, like I'm doing right there. And you see that indentation. And he said, all you got to do is keep your relationship with me and your recovery at the center of your life, and I'll take care of the rest. And right away, I felt this peace, like, yeah, that'll work. That'll work. And then right away, I thought, okay, well, what's my part? I'm doing it. I'm doing my part. I'm praying. I'm trying to get quiet. I'm trying to connect with God. I'm going to meetings. I'm not drinking and I'm not drugging. And I'm doing my part. I'm going to meetings. I'm in treatment. I'm doing my part. And then right away, it was like God said, you do your part. I'll do mine. And I knew right away, could I make Donna love me? No. Could I bring my parents back from the grave? My mom died thinking I was going to beat her to the grave, right? Scared to death for her son. My father died before I got clean. Could I bring my parents back? Can I undo my broken finances? Can I fix any of this? No. Can I pay my bills when I have no job, no income? No. And so here I am 33 years later. I'm doing my part. That's what I'm here with all of you tonight, doing my one thing. And what's God done with that? We're going to talk about some of that tonight. What God's done with that is a whole lot more, because God's done his part. My marriage is healed. My finances are healed. And if we have the opportunity, I'm going to talk some later in our conversation about connecting with folks from beyond the grave. So there's a power at work here that is so great, and the only thing that limits that power is me. And the last thing God said to me in that moment when I had this vital encounter with God was this. He said, Terry, you do the work. I'll do the worry. And then he looked, and then his voice changed. And it was like, hey man, a lot of people like to do my part, but just know I'm not going to do yours. And that was it. That's a hell of an encounter with God as a dying man. That encounter occurred in the first week in June 1991. How about you? How about moments like that in your life?
So You know how, Terry, when you're sober for a long time and you know your story is your story. And sometimes when I tell it, I almost get tired of it. I feel like one of those groups that goes on tour and you do your song so often. Now you want to do a new arrangement or you want to do something else like that because I think, oh, they probably, cause I hear it so much, but I've got to tell it. I've got to tell the moment that, and Raquel kind of like, segued into when she talked about, she gave the reading about the fall leading to the grace, right? Leading to this experience and what have you. July the 13th of 1986. I'm selling some bags of weed for a guy named Kenny that lives 3 or 4 doors down from my mother's house. It's a Sunday. My mother's at church. I've been relegated. I'm the lawyer in the family, but I've been relegated now to sitting on a curb, running bags of weed out to cars for a youngster, because that's where my disease has taken me. That's what I'm doing on Sundays. The kid that used to go to church every Sunday morning with his mama. Because now I've hidden so much from God. I can't even think about God because I know what the consequences are of my actions. So I banish God from my life by this time. I don't even, and getting loaded helps with that, obviously, right? You know, so I'm running these bags of weed. Kenny decides I'm doing so well with sales. He decides he's going to take a break to go to lunch and he leaves me a few bags. And when he leaves, I make a few sales and I have a thought come. I said, well, I need to diversify his commodities and invest in some other, products. So I go out and I buy some cocaine and naturally product control is very important. So I have to test it to make sure that it's not bunk, right? You know, and you know where this story goes. So I don't have Kenny's money now. And Kenny's dangerous and I know he's going to hurt me bad. Now, this is not the first jackpot I've been in, but I'm very scared right now. And so I have a bright idea. I said, if I take Kenny in my mother's house, she's gotten dropped off from church by these sisters that are taking care of her because her predatory sons can no longer take care of her. So she's been dropped off from church by these sisters. And I have this thought. If I take Kenny in mama's house and explain to him I don't have the money, he won't do anything to me. And so I take Kenny in the house and I'm explaining to him, mama can't hear what we're saying. She's in the kitchen cooking. And come on, Kenny, I'm sorry, man, I messed up. And I did blah, blah. And Kenny's very reasonable. And he says, Ronnie, it's cool. We'll make credit arrangements. Why don't we just step out on the porch and talk about it, right? And I think, yes, I've gotten over one more time, like I've done many times in the past, the gift of gab. And so Kenny steps outside. I step outside after him, Terry, looking back, making sure mama was close enough to see so that I could feel safe, coward that I am. And I step outside and Kenny was waiting on me and he must have hit me as hard as he possibly could. And I found myself flying across my mother's front yard and I landed on her grass and he proceeded to run and started kicking me in the head and stomping me, trying to kill me. And as he's kicking me and stomping me, I felt as if I removed from my body watching this happen. And as I see Kenny kicking me and stomping me, I looked over and mama steps out on the porch. And I expect her to say, stop, that's my baby. But mama says nothing, Terry. And I look back over at Kenny and he's still kicking me and stomping. And I look at mama and mama turns around and she walks back in the house and she closes the door. And now previously my story with mama ended right there. And I talk about, you know, I go check in the treatment the next day and do all that. But my brothers and my wife and all my family gave me a sobriety birthday party on Zoom 2 years ago. And mama was at the Zoom party, right? And mama talked about how, and they asked mama about that incident. And she talked about how, yeah, she's watched Kenny do this. And she said she went back in the house. And when she went back in the house, she sat on the couch and watched it through the window. Now, you know what my initial thought was, how cold-blooded was that? How could she, you know, she watched it. And then the second thought hit me. about how selfish and self-centered I've become, how separated from God I become, because I'm only thinking about me, and I can't even think about what my mother must have been feeling, Terry. When I was young, I was asthmatic, and I would have asthma attacks, and this was before they had inhalers. And I would have to be rushed to the hospital. My mother would get in a cab or do something to get me to the hospital. And they would put me in these beds covered by oxygen, by plastic, and they pump oxygen in there, right, so that I could breathe. My mother would sit vigil. She would sit bedside for hours with her hand snaked underneath that plastic to hold my little hand so I would know I wasn't alone. I've always had the presence of God around me through my mother, but I couldn't see it. I was so blind. And this is the woman that I'm exposing to the wolf, that I'm bringing in her house, right? And I'm so selfish and self-centered and so lost that I can't even see it. And God was right there with me. God had me watch this, Terry. God had me see all of this, because it was that fall that made me believe whatever it was that I made that woman go back in the house, the kindest, lovingest, most, whatever it was I'd done that made her not cry out, I knew I was done. See, God touched me that day. I was given grace. Now, I need to let you know, don't make me sound all spiritual, because I had a 20 in my sock while the guy was beating me, right? You know, $20 rock. And if I had given it to him, he probably would have stopped. And so when he was finished beating me, I ran around the corner and I hit the rock and I didn't feel anything. And I drank some cheap wine he had and I didn't feel anything. Terry, I believe if I had felt something, I wouldn't be sitting here speaking with you right now. But God intervened and took the taste out of my mouth right then. I didn't know it at the time. That was the last drink I've had up to this day, right? And God's hand was in all of it, even though I couldn't see it at the time.
So God was so into it for me in the exact same way, right? So I'm a smoker, right? But I'm not coming to my house. I got a wife and kids. So I drink, I smoke, I have a drink. First thing I think of is I got to get some cocaine. For the last 6 months of my smoking, I would get in the car out in the middle of nowhere. I would hit the pipe, start taking that pull, and then instantly behind me, I'd see the lights of the police car down in the distance. And I did not get a full hit for the last 6 months. And it's the most insane shit, right? Because they were never there. It was all just in my head. But on reflection, I've come to the same conclusion, that was God creating enough paranoia in me to stop me from taking the hit that may have stopped my heart before I could get to the rest of his story. So on to my mom, right? So my mom says to me, "Get out of here, you make me sick." Right? And that's my treatment. I go through my whole life thinking my mother's last words to me were, "Get out of here, you make me sick." And then I get sober, I get touched by grace. I'm 10 years sober and I go to start a retreat, right? So me and my sponsor and a couple of guys, we pull up on this place and we get this retreat going, and it's great. And a priest was leading this retreat, the alcoholic priest. And he's in this chapel and it's dark. And he says, call into your mind some pain in your life, some moment, some suffering, something unresolved, and we're going to heal it. We're going to bring God into it. And I'm sitting up thinking, I'm good. I got nothing. My business is good. My marriage is good. I'm 10 years sober. My son's sober at this time. My life is good in every way, shape, and form. I can think of nothing. But I know enough to where I've been blessed to be around people like all of you on this Zoom that expose me to something other than my own thoughts. And so by being exposed to this, I know, just sit and breathe. Just sit and breathe. And I sat and breathed. And the next thing you know, man, I'm sitting there He said, now I'm sitting there and I'm in that laundry room with my mom that day where she's telling me the nuns came and how ashamed of me she is. And they said, now bring your higher power into that picture. And so at that time, I didn't really have a concept of what God looked like. I'm omnitheistic. I think it's the same God for all people, always. And there he was, man. If that's not what Jesus looks like, if anybody wants to know what it looks like, I think I saw him that day. So we're sitting underneath the oak tree in my backyard. And there was my mother and Jesus. And not a word was said. And then come out of meditation. That's it. And then they had an ice cream social after what's called a guided healing meditation. And this priest walks up to him and he goes, hey man, how was the meditation for? I said, oh, yeah, it's cool. He goes, you experienced that? Oh no, nothing really. I saw my mom and the tears came out, right? I had no idea I had tears. I had no idea I had the pain. I've done plenty of inventory. I'm not a wallflower. I don't hide from my own life. I'll put it on paper. I'll share it. But what occurred for me is it opened the door. And what he said to me, he goes, man, I'll open the door. And then I shared that with Howard Polans, my dear friend. And I said, Howard, this is what happened. He goes, God opened the door, man. He said, more healings to come. And over the last years of my life, I had that first experience. And then years later, I have another experience. And I'm in meditation. And I'm at my mother's bedside as she's dying. And I would get oatmeal with vitamins in it, and I would feed her with the eyedropper. And the cancer, my mother hadn't spoken in years, so not in years and months. She would just make noises, and I'm feeding her. That was my job after school, and I'm giving her the eyedropper, and my mom's going, and she won't take it. And if she won't take it, I start to get upset, right? I'm like, damn, Mom, because I know if she dies, I don't even know why I'm upset, but she's fighting me on it. And I go, Mom, what? And she went, I love you, baby. Those were my mother's last words. I got sober May 23rd, 1991, and I did not hear those words until I was 50 years old. Man, how much more could I give to AA or to God that they have given me the grace of that healing to have known that those weren't her last words. And then I thought about that. Why did I hold on to, get out of here, you make me sick? Because that's fuel for my disease. My disease loves hurt, pain, victimhood, conflict. I love you, baby doesn't feed the victim, do some dope, do some drinking narrative. And the last, I got to bring this around. I'm meditating. Common theme here, right? Getting to the silence where we can hear God's first language. And I'm meditating, and as I'm meditating, I see the nuns walk away from my house. I always wondered, how did that shit go down, right? What happened? How did they betray me? How did they think that was okay? And there were the nuns walking away from my house, and I watched my mother take this. It was a school paper. I had been writing on it, right, doing my assignment, but it was like written like scrawl, like just, and they had brought that paper as proof of how loaded I was and how drunk and drugged up I was. And there was the evidence. And they gave that to my mom. And I'm watching this in meditation. I'm watching my mother fold that paper up. And she kissed it. And she put it in the family Bible. And my mother gave me to God then, way before anybody worked a 12-step on me. So if there isn't a power at work in this world, God has been in that pursuit, like I said, for me forever. And then the last scene in that is my mother's dead and we're packing away the family Bible. And I pick up, the great big ones, man. And I pick it up and it's heavy and I see a lump in it. And I open it up and I see it's that paper. And I took that paper and I read it and I was like, oh man, I'm in trouble, right? I knew, because I don't know what to do with this. So I wadded it up and I stuffed it in the trash. And I came out of that meditation. So since I've been sober, I've had 3 different times where I have been in the divine presence of my dead mother. I see dead people. It's like, damn, man. How can you doubt this power that can heal wounds I didn't even know I had the first 10 years? How has your view of God changed over those first few years?
So it's a trip that one of the things that I suffer from, Terry, sometimes, and this was part of parcel of my disease, is from comparing my experience to the experience of others. And I almost told Raquel I didn't want to do this because I know you. I've known you for almost all your sobriety, right? And I know you've had some great, you have a great way of sharing these experiences and stuff that you had and this recall of it. And I was thinking, damn, I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can, because, again, I was raised in a church, in a Baptist church, where when you talk about spiritual experience, the way it looked to me was the choir would get going, right? And the church would start bouncing, and the preacher would be preaching, right? And then some lady would just, right? She'd get up and right? And she'd start speaking in tongues, or she'd start doing falling out, and I thought that's what a spiritual experience looked like. That's what being at one with God, or feeling the Holy Ghost, as they called it, the Holy Spirit. That's what and I never felt that. Yeah. I've never felt that. And I thought that I was empty, that I was broken, that there was something about me. I told you about the experience with the little girl in the church and all this stuff. And so I thought, I've gone to funerals. I see, and Ralph has always been the person I've looked up to. 1 year older than me. I've always looked up to him because he's always in the chair. And Ralph would be so emotional at funerals and he would cry. I can't cry. I have to force myself to cry. And I wonder what's wrong with me. And what I found is I just expressed my emotions differently. But at the time I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, has God left me? Right? Is God not with me? I get sober. And I truly believe that I can't stay sober on the experiences I had in my first year. I have to have a series of spiritual experiences in order. And sometimes, Terry, they've already happened, and now I just have to recall them in order for me to, because I don't see them when they happen sometimes. When I was in a sober living, I stayed in sober living till I was 10 months sober. I got a part-time job when I was in that sober living, being a bookkeeper for a little old lady who had a nursing home. Now, it might sound fancy. Let me just tell you, I would catch the bus to her house. She sat me on the chair in her living room. She gave me a stack of her bills, and she took her checkbook and she signed a bunch of blank checks. She handed me the checkbook and she said, Mr. White, I want you to pay all my bills and please balance my checkbook for me, and I'll be back in a couple of hours. And she left me alone in her house with a bunch of blank signed checks. And I'm 5 months sober. Right. And I'm scared. When she came back 2 hours later, I was sitting in the same place where she had left me. And I gave her all her bills. They were sealed up with checks inside. I gave her checkbook back. There were no checks missing. I balanced that checkbook for her. She paid me $40 a week to do that job. And when I caught the bus back to my sober living, I felt 10 feet tall. Because I knew there was something about me, not of my own volition, Terry, not of my own doing, that something had happened to me. When I would catch the bus to that job for that lady, I used to pass by a newspaper rack of the LA Times. I know we have some young people on here. I don't have enough time to explain what a newspaper is. But there would be these stacks of newspapers in there, and I would put a quarter in there, and I would grab a stack of newspapers to take to the guys back at the sober living, because I knew they were on hard time. So I would go back and they were very grateful. I passed them out and stuff, and I felt like I'm doing God's work, right? While I'm doing that, I'm stealing is what I am. I'm a thief. I put 1 quarter in and I took a bunch of newspapers, right? But I'm feeling like, yeah. Well, one day on my way back to the recovery home, I passed by that newspaper rack. I put in 1 quarter and I took out one newspaper. I went back to the sober living. I read the newspaper. I divided it into all the different parts, the sports page, the metro, the entertainment, and I spread it around the TV room that all the guys would go. And nobody complained about not getting their own newspaper. Everybody thanked me just like they thanked me before and what I realized in hindsight, I hadn't told anybody about what I was doing with all those stealing newspapers. Nobody said anything. I didn't have a conscious thought about it, Terry. But something happened to me where I changed and I took one newspaper. Now, that might not be a big deal to nobody else, but there's something about the way this power works in your life. What had I been doing? I've been going to meetings. I've been going to the Alano Club on Saturday nights and mopping the floor after the dance. I was going to the coffee shop. Me and Ralph would go to the coffee shop with these people who seemed so much more sober than us. What we learned later is they had maybe a year more sober than us. They were had 2 years. We were just coming up on a year. And we would go to the coffee shop and we'd sit and talk just like we talking right now. Till the wee hours of the morning, we just sit and talk. And what I found is the action that you guys have given me in this fellowship changed me and connected me with something already inside me, something that I got disconnected from in that church when I was little, and the connection was made again. And if I tried to do it, I would have fucked it up. It just has to come, right? And I know that's grace. That's the name I put to it. I say that it's grace, and so. And I built on that relationship as time has gone on. I got disbarred 10 years ago. Wanted to commit suicide as a result of it. Thought God was, I don't know why. I thought, was I not doing something, God? And I thought, God, why, God? I thought I was doing everything I was supposed to. God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. I was starting to not be as good an attorney as I had been earlier. I was starting to get lazy. I was starting to be disenchanted with my clients. I was starting to not work as hard on my cases. All these things I look at now in hindsight. And God does for me what I can't do for myself. My life is better now than it's ever been. I never thought it would be that way, Terry. I thought that all was lost. I was 60 years old when I was disbarred. I had never done anything else in my life but practice law. And I was thinking to myself, what can I do? I'm 60. How am I going to feed my family? And fear just was running rampant. But you know what I kept doing? I kept going to meetings. And I kept sharing about it with people. I didn't hide. I didn't isolate. I didn't go away from the fellow. I leaned in. And God was there. God has never spoken to me directly. Maybe fortunately, because no telling what I would have done. But Terry, I hear the voice of God when I hear you, my friend. When I hear Raquel, when I hear my brother, when I hear Chris, there are all kind of people that I hear the voice of God speaking now. And I have no doubt that he is. It is. She is. Whatever it is, right?
That's one of the most beautiful stories, man. And I know enough today to know that had you kept taking that stack of newspapers, if that conversion didn't happen, there'd be somebody else up here on the Zoom tonight. And every one of us have those moments in our recovery, in those little tiny things when we face a fear and we walk through it. So, to be able to do this with you, right, man, you've been one of my favorite speakers since I got sober. I grew up on you and your brother's talks. And then I know what your struggles were, man. And at least I'd heard, but I'd never heard of them in a negative light because you put them out there, right? And I thought, how do you face that kind of a difficulty? Because in this program, man, if we share it, we can get through it. And if we don't share it, then we're stuck with ourselves. And when I say God, I don't know, was it God's hands or was it someone's wisdom doing that in front of me? That's how I recall.
Right.
It doesn't matter. The reality is God's still speaking, but he never came to me through the Bible or the big book. He comes to me through the men and women of the fellowships. That's how God came to me in the beginning when I was 12 stepped into this program. And that's how God's coming to me tonight with you. So
Amen, brother.
Part of our deal where we're supposed to check this box. You know how to do that, my man? I'm technologically not.
I know. Raquel, are we supposed to take some questions or something? Or is something supposed to happen? Are we up against the hour?
This is up to you. You can take the questions, Terry, the way you're going to see them. If you go to the chat, you're going to be able to see them in the bottom of your screen, and you can continue to talk and just do what you're doing. You have until the hour and 15 minutes or even more if you want. So please feel free.
Okay, so we got another 15 minutes we can go?
That's right. You
Okay.
should have some questions probably there. Mm-hmm.
That sounds good. So you know what I want to talk about, man? I want to talk about encounter I had. Now this one wasn't with God, right? So sometimes life comes at us hard, as you well know. And sometimes, it's like, damn, man, that sucked. Damn, that sucked. Damn, that sucked. Next thing you know, and I had a situation a few years ago, man, where I had so many things stack up on me at one time to where I was literally in a place where I was just like, almost like, man, I'm going through the motion praying. And while I was praying, I have good disciplines, right? I tell my guys we fight like we train. So I pray on my knees every morning. I do a review on my knees every night. And sometimes what happens, though, Ralph, is I get rocked to sleep in doing that, right? The same thing. And Ronald, and what happened to me this one, I'm on my knees praying, and I hear, what are you doing on your knees? You know prayer is bullshit. You know this don't work. You prayed for Sean, he's dead. You prayed for Walt, he's dead. You prayed for your granddaughter, Nora. Hey, buddy, you're 0 for 3. And I was like, oh, man. I was so shocked to have heard that voice that sent that chill down my spine that I believe to this very day it still impacts the way I pray. So I still hit my knees. I still follow through with it. I asked my sponsor, because he's a priest, and he said, man, sometimes you just go through periods where you pray and it's like it's into the void, like there's nobody there. Do you have experience with praying and thinking that there ain't nobody listening?
I have, and I know this comes with long-term sobriety. This comes with anybody anyway, and it came with me. That after a while, Terry, sometimes I almost feel like it's robotic. I almost feel like what I'm doing is just, it's okay. And what I know is keep doing it anyway. How do I know that? From my experience. Just keep doing it anyway, because remember that saying they used to tell us, they said, this too shall pass. Now, I thought that was a trite saying that they said, and they said that happens for both good shit and for bad stuff. This too shall pass. And I have had those periods, man, where I felt, especially when I lost my license, I really had doubts about God. I really had that. Now, your question was, did I ever think that my prayers were not being heard? Were not going, did it feel like they were empty? They were going, yes. Yes, because I've never didn't think there was a God, but I thought maybe God wasn't listening to me no more. That I don't know what it was. And sometimes I was doubting if there was a God. Have I been fooling myself all this time? Have I just really been, is this just sometimes I feel that. And I don't feel, thank God, I don't feel like right now, but I have gone through periods. There have been dark periods, and again, trained feet. Thank God that even though I was feeling that, I kept I kept doing the action, even when I wasn't feeling it. And I've always been, I guess, a feel person. I wanted to feel a particular way. What I find out is, man, that feelings are transient. They come and they go. What I need to see are the results. And that's where sponsorship really comes in for me, because even when I'm doubting it, I can see it in the people I sponsored here. I can go ahead and I can see it in other people. And that's why this fellowship, it's the embodiment, I think, is what God has given us, man. And in order to keep a guy when I get raggedy and stuff, man, it still carries me through those moments. Yeah. And it's unexplainable.
Yeah, it's the legacy, right? The legacy of unity, and being connected to folks. When somebody's moving, we all get together and we move them, we help each other. And, I've been in that period of feeling that void myself, but I hear it in people. Monday night, I'm sitting in my meeting and this dude's telling the story, picking up his 7-year medallion. And he's telling this story about that he had decided he was going to kill himself. And he was going to drive off a cliff at a certain point on the highway. And he knew the road between Phoenix and Prescott, and he knew right where to do it. And he had it all worked out. So he called this dude and he goes, "Hey man, look, I'm getting ready to go up here. I got something happening right now. I'm walking up on a stage to receive an award. I'm going to text you some phone numbers. Call these numbers and then hit me up later." And he knew the dude was on his way down. He didn't know the dude was going to kill himself halfway there. So the guy calls all the numbers. He don't catch anybody, right? And nobody's answering. And then he says, "I call this old guy with this raspy voice." And he starts talking to me. "Oh man, I love you. I'm so glad you called me. It's so good to hear your voice." And he's making fun of me, right, as he's sharing this story. And as he tells this story, he says then that I talked to him all the way from Prescott to Phoenix, which was 2 hours. And halfway down the road, he realized he had driven past the off the cliff point. So I can see it in all of that. But, the reason I think I encounter some of that stuff is I got some experiences with that. So I was going through a hard time, and a friend of mine sent me this prayer. It was it wasn't a prayer, it was a story about this old man was dying. And his daughter called the local priest to come out to give him his last rites. So the priest comes to the man's home, walks, the daughter says down the hall, goes in the room, and there's this old man laying in the bed, and there's an empty chair next to him. And he goes, "Oh, it looks like you're expecting me." And the old guy said, "No, I'm not. I don't get any visitors anymore." He goes, "I was just taught a long time ago that if you're having troubles, you place an empty chair by your bedside. You just talk to that empty chair like it's God. And if you do that, it works just fine." And the priest said to him, "Man, you don't need my help, bro. That's a beautiful concept." So they had a nice conversation, and away he went. And a couple of days later, the daughter calls, says her father had passed. And they said, "Was he in peace?" She said, "Yeah, it was the darndest thing, though. We found him laying sideways across the bed with his head in the lap of the chair." And it said, if you're going through difficulties, I knew to pray for strength, courage, guidance, wisdom, serenity, but I didn't know I could pray for comfort. So I started doing this, man. I started putting my and I'm praying for comfort, and I'm praying for comfort, and I'm praying for comfort. And one day I'm praying for comfort, and I hear that voice again. It says, "What are you doing, sucking God's dick?" I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but it's like, damn, man, so God,
I don't think I can top that.
So I know how real this power is in my life.
I have to tell the guy that I've been disbarred, right? And I said, well, I'm not a lawyer anymore, so I know you probably want to get another retreat leader or whatever. And he says to me, and he says, well, we got you booked and we got whatever. So come on, you've been in the legal profession. You know what a lot of these people have been going through, suffering through substance abuse. They're in the legal community. Come on down and lead the retreat anyway. So I go down to lead the retreat, not feeling particularly good about myself because now I'm among my what are former peers, right? I'm no longer in the fraternity. I'm no longer, I'm got feeling all that. And so I go there, and the retreat it's that first night, and I do the first do. Once we get started, my head goes away. We have a candlelight meeting, and there's this young white kid, and I think he's in law school. And where everybody's going around sharing, and then he shares, he said, when I was young, when I was new in sobriety and I was struggling, he said, I used to listen to this tape of this guy, he says, and he said, and I would listen to it over and over. And he said, and when I would hear it, he said, the guy wasn't nothing like me. He was a black guy from South Central Los Angeles. And he said, and I can't believe I'm sitting next to him right now. And he said, sir, you said you helped save my life, right? Is this kid all the way in Oregon that I've known nothing, and that, and he's got one of these cassettes, right, of one of my talks. And you never know, Terry, when you're doing what we do, you never know who you're touching. And he don't know how he touched me. And he made me feel like I was okay. Right? Wow. That in spite of all of my, all this noise in my head, all this pride and ego that was trying to crush me and kill me, he was able to make all that go away for at least for that time. Man, that's what we do for each other. And I could not be more proud to be your friend, to be able to, and when you bring me and Ralph out, man, to be with you guys in Arizona and stuff, I can't tell you what it means to me and all of that. And so, to be given this time, Raquel, you don't know, what you've been able to do for us, by allowing us to sit here and just talk to each other. Because this is my friend. We've never had the opportunity to talk like this, and I think everybody should have an opportunity to do something like this. It's amazing.
Raquel, what do you got for us, girl? We're grateful for you.
Oh my God. I am actually, I don't know if you were able to see the questions, but I'm going to make an observation about this. In tonight's conversation, I got to see two beautiful approaches that God can have with each one of us. I one time heard something that the God of my understanding is going to talk to me in ways that only I can understand. And it was so beautiful to hear the approach that God has had with both of you. And this whole idea of praying for comfort, or praying, or just feeling God in the doing, the thing that I was supposed to do. When what Ron said, that innermost part of me that has always been there, I was actually thinking, when sadness comes, when heartache comes, when despair opens the door, how do you feel God again back in your lives?
Just for myself, Raquel, I've created a life that I can never be far away from the fellowship. I can never be far away from you guys. And it allows me, and by extension, it allows me to be there for my family. I've got my wife, my two kids, and I've got 4 grandchildren, and I've got, just my life, the life that I've been given, thankfully, has allowed me to not stray too far. Now, mind you, I still go in here. You see, this is the place that I can get lost, up in here. However, thank God for trained feet and being able to go ahead and continue to do all the things that I've been trained to do here. And I just can't tell you how grateful I am for it.
You know, Ram Dass said there's only one marriage, and that's between you and God. And he said many of us feel the need to form a partnership with another person on this plane to do the work of going to God together. And he said, and that's the only real marriage, joining with another and doing the work of going to God together. He said, if you're marrying for finances, if you're marrying for companionship, if you're marrying for sexual gratification, it will pass and there will be suffering. But so I've been fortunate. So me and my wife have embraced this program because our marriage was on a thread. It was done. But as I started to get better, Donna gave me the grace. She didn't want to kick this old dog to the curb, give me at least a chance to recover. And I've done my part. So when I come home from a meeting, I tell her, thank you for staying in my life. My life's a living expression of my ninth step, making those amends to my wife. But, by being led by people spiritually, like this meeting, this whole format of talking about God, it's like, man, this is what it's all about. In the big book, it says, the reason we've written this book is to help you to find a relationship with God that will solve your problem. And we need that relationship. But sometimes life comes hard. And one night it came so hard to our life, man. Our granddaughter Nora was diagnosed. It was 3 years ago. She was diagnosed with brittle bone disease. They said she's going to be a little person. She has dwarfism. And they said in the womb she had a broken leg. And our son was at our house saying, is it okay if I don't want my daughter to live, if she's just going to die? Is it okay if he said everywhere he read that this disease causes like 99% divorce? I don't want to lose my wife and my kid. Just the most devastating night. And man, I just held that boy, middle linebacker, and I'm holding that kid as he's sobbing, man, and I'm crying too. And it was in that period, Ronald, where my prayer life, right? Hearing those voices about prayer, and it's weakening me up. And I wake up that next morning, and I grab my phone, and I walk down the hall, and my phone goes, woo, 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 starts buzzing. And I look, and the first one's from a friend of mine, Elizabeth, that says, praying for Nora. I hadn't told anybody what was going on because I was too afraid to say what was going on. And so man, I'll tell you what, I walk out and there's Donna sitting in the dark of the living room in the light of the cell phone's got her face illuminated and she's blasting out prayer chains. And I said, what are you doing? She said, my mom and dad used to ask for prayer chains. I started sending prayer chains. And I thought, man, I haven't been asking for help. So I went on social media and I said, here's what's up. I started prayer chains. I started asking people, pray for my family. Please pray for my family. At 3:00 that day, 3:00 that afternoon, the doctors called my son and his wife. And they said, we made a mistake. We can't understand it. We can't explain this mistake. I had other doctors come in and they checked the work. The broken leg must have been my error or the angle of the camera. And the amniocentesis shows this child she has achondroplasia, but she does not have brittle bone disease. She's going to have a full and happy life. I can't explain it. And I looked at Donna and I thought, I can. But what I also know, and I'm humble enough to know this, that God doesn't always answer prayers that way. I'm exceptionally grateful that that's how we heard, that somehow that those circumstances happen this way. But I know that God is real. So I got to stay close to people that call me to go deeper with God. Like my dear friend says, when the waves come, you got to go deep. Because deeper with God is all there is. I love y'all. I love you, Ronald.
I love you, brother.
That was beautiful. Let me just close and then we will open the mics to thank our speaker. Uy,